In my previous video, Spellbound, What Webs of Words We Weave, it was about how our perception is largely created by language, and how words form our understanding of the world. In it, I spoke about how words are often used to manipulate and control individuals as well as entire populations. I touched briefly on what is essentially linguistic hypnosis, the process of implanting hidden commands within ordinary language, influencing behavior without the target's awareness. For example, in advertisements, political speeches, or public service announcements, the subconscious mind can be primed with suggestions and commands, camouflaged as regular speech. This is often called NLP, short for neuro-linguistic programming. That video, which I hope you enjoyed, was fundamental, but just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to understanding the use of speech to direct or influence behavior. One of the more common techniques is called the Milton model of language, developed by Milton Erickson. This model uses vague and indirect language to guide the subconscious mind. Politicians, advertisers, and public figures often utilize this model to subtly implant ideas, beliefs, and desires into the minds of the audience without their conscious awareness. But today I'm going to be taking a broader look at mind control and its implications in modern society. Imagine for a moment that the very thoughts you hold, the decisions you make, and the reality you experience are not entirely your own. That everything you believe is part of a grand script written by forces you can't even see. What if the mind itself, the seat of your personal power, has been molded and shaped by hidden hands, and you've been living in a reality constructed by those with the power to control your perceptions? This is not the product of fantasy or conspiracy. This is the real world we live in. A world where mass mind control has been perfected, and the manipulation of entire populations has been happening for centuries. It is subtle, it is pervasive, and it is more effective than you could possibly imagine. And the most disturbing part? It's happening right now. Once you see it, you can never unsee it. But the question is, do you want to break free? The roots of mind control run deeper than we often realize. They don't start with the social engineers of today, or even those of the early 20th, 19th, or 18th century. These modern architects of manipulation were simply inheritors of knowledge passed down from ancient civilizations that understood the mechanics of human behavior and perception far better than we do today. Ancient Egypt, Rome, and Greece used ritual, mythology, and symbolism to create a collective consciousness that aligned with their power. The pharaohs and emperors knew the secret to control lay not just in brute force, but in the ability to shape belief. Take, for example, Plato's allegory of the cave. In this profound philosophical metaphor, prisoners are shackled inside a cave, unable to see anything but the shadows cast on the wall. They take these shadows for reality, unaware of the true world outside. This is a powerful metaphor, not just for how we are conditioned by our societies, but how the world is built on illusion. The cave represents our limited understanding of reality. As Plato suggests, when one escapes and sees the light, the others will reject it, unwilling to confront the truth of the world beyond the shadows. This allegory is not just a metaphysical concept. It is the foundation for how societies have maintained control for millennia. And for millennia, mind control has been practiced in one form or another. We often overlook religions, ancient cults, and empires that were built on controlling entire populations by tapping into human psychology. The ancient mystery schools of Egypt and Greece weren't just for spiritual enlightenment. They were part of a psychological and ideological control system. The pyramids of Giza, far from just being tombs, were architectural tools designed to induce certain altered states of consciousness in initiates. Sacred geometry, encoded in their structure, was intended to activate specific regions of the brain, aligning the initiate with higher spiritual or energetic frequency. Much like today's media indoctrination aligns the masses with a predetermined frequency of thought and behavior. In Rome, orators like Cicero were early masters of the psychopolitical manipulation of the masses. They understood that the art of persuasion was far more than just rhetoric. It was about shaping the collective consciousness through speeches, festivals, and grand displays of power. What you probably don't know is that the tools they used for mind control were largely based on psychological principles. Principles that were consciously deployed for the purpose of manipulating the Roman psyche. This wasn't just about convincing people of a political message. It was about creating an altered reality for the masses, a reality in which their consent was easily manipulated. Before the advent of modern psychology, ancient occult traditions had already been exploring and applying principles of psychological control. The Egyptians, Greeks, and even the mystery schools in the Near East were mastering the art of subconscious influence long before Sigmund Freud and B.F. Skinner. These occult traditions were not just mystical practices, but often very practical methods of shaping minds. Take, for example, the Egyptian priesthood. They were adept at using rituals, symbols, and language to evoke powerful emotions and alter states of consciousness. These initiations were designed to bypass the rational mind and tap directly into the subconscious. Initiations were often led through darkened chambers, exposed to loud sounds and guided by the manipulation of light and shadow to create an atmosphere that was overwhelming for the senses. This was an early form of sensory overload, a tactic that would later be applied to modern advertising and media. But it didn't stop there. The very ritualistic nature of occult practices was designed to reshape beliefs and create a psychological environment that would make people susceptible to control. Think of the Masonic traditions or Rosicrucianism, occult schools that have often worked behind the scenes for centuries. These schools weren't just about spirituality, they were about social control. Coded language, secrecy, and symbolic gestures were used to communicate specific ideas that align the mind of the initiate with a broader collective agenda. This practice in the occult didn't need specific understanding of the brain to work. It was instinctive, passed down through generations of controllers. Before modern psychology and the tools of behavioral science were fully developed, ancient practices utilized rituals and altered states of consciousness to exert control over individuals and communities. These methods were not just based on physical punishment or torture, but also on more subtle and esoteric techniques that involved energy manipulation, symbolic rituals, and psychic influence. In ancient Egypt, for example, priests used hypnotic rituals in temples where worshippers were subjected to chanting, visual stimuli, and incantations that placed them in altered states of consciousness. These states made them more receptive to the ideas and commands of the priests, who were seen as the intermediaries between the gods and men. The ancient mystery schools were experts in using psychic techniques to manipulate consciousness and lead people into a trance-like state where they could be programmed with certain beliefs, loyalties, and fears. These methods of mind control were practiced across many ancient cultures, including the Babylonians, Persians, and Greeks, and formed the basis of the occult knowledge that would later be expanded upon in the modern era. Before the rise of modern psychologists, the Catholic Church was one of the primary institutions using psychological principles of reward and punishment. Many of the early mind control techniques that would later be formalized by Pavlov and Skinner had been practiced by the Church for centuries. In medieval times, punishment and reward were intertwined with religious teachings. The idea of eternal salvation was the ultimate reward, while hellfire was the ultimate punishment. These psychological motivators were used as tools to control the masses. The Church knew that human beings are motivated by desires to avoid pain and seek pleasure, and fear of punishment is one of the most powerful ways to manipulate behavior. What you might not know is that early Christian doctrines were designed not just to govern morality, but also to create a population that was psychologically submissive. The idea of original sin was used to create an inherent sense of guilt, which was later amplified by the confession booth, a tool to reinforce the power of the priesthood by making individuals feel constantly vulnerable and needing of guidance. Guilt, shame, and fear are some of the most powerful tools in the subconscious manipulation toolbox. The Catholic Church effectively laid the groundwork for the psychopolitical systems of control that would become widespread in the modern era. Monarchies throughout history have relied heavily on psychological manipulation and mind control to maintain power, especially when they face challenges to their legitimacy. Often, this involved the conflation of political power with divine authority. Monarchs, particularly in Europe, claimed that their authority to rule was divinely ordained. This reinforced the idea that questioning the monarch was tantamount to defying God, creating a system where the populace was conditioned to obey their rulers without question. The Catholic Church, for example, used religion as a means to control the masses, creating a system where questioning the church or the monarch was seen as a grave sin. This combination of fear and dogmatic belief worked to maintain power structures for centuries. Methods like the Spanish Inquisition were designed not only to root out heretics, but to serve as a form of psychological control. Public torture and executions created fear among the populace, and the torturers themselves were often trained in the methods that could break down a person's mental resistance. The goal was not just to extract confessions, but to mentally break individuals and to create an atmosphere of fear that kept the masses in line. But mind control doesn't stop at the physical. It operates on the deepest metaphysical levels. Language, time, perception, and even the fabric of reality itself can be molded by those who understand the mind's structure. Language isn't just a tool for communication. It is the fabric of our very perception. As we've seen in previous discussions, words and phrases shape reality. We don't just use language to describe the world, we use it to construct it. But that construction can be hijacked, leading us to believe in a reality that is not our own. And then there is time. Our understanding of time as linear is a cultural construct. But if time is malleable, can it be manipulated to control how we experience events? And what if the media, the news, and politics could shape time itself, influencing how we perceive past, present, and future events? What if time isn't just linear, but is a fluid construct that can be used to keep us in a perpetual state of distraction, always looking ahead to the next crisis or event? This kind of manipulation leads us to mind control that affects the very way we process reality. Quantum mechanics provides a fascinating lens through which we can understand this. The idea that reality is not fixed, but rather a probability dependent on the observer, shows that our collective consciousness can shape reality itself. But when that collective consciousness is steered, controlled, and warped, what kind of reality are we creating? What if reality itself is just another illusion, an illusion carefully constructed by those in power? From the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade to modern-day forms of slavery, mind control was a fundamental tool used to keep enslaved populations subjugated. In the Americas, slave owners used psychological tactics to break the will of enslaved individuals. Physical punishment was often accompanied by mental tactics designed to erase a person's sense of self-worth and autonomy. Religious manipulation, for example, played a significant role in reinforcing the idea that the enslaved were chosen by a higher power to endure suffering. This has not only justified their suffering, but also created a psychological framework that made resistance seem futile. Slaves were often kept isolated from their families or from other slaves from different regions, which prevented the creation of solidarity and collective resistance. Fear of punishment for disobedience, along with the constant surveillance of overseers, created a system where the enslaved internalized their subjugation. The education system, while often seen as a pathway to success, is one of the most powerful mind control tools ever devised. We think of the Prussian education system, the model for most Western countries, as a purely intellectual development tool, but in reality, it was designed to create obedient workers, docile citizens, and patriotic soldiers. What you may not know is that the founders of this system, people like Horace Mann, were not only reformers, they were deeply influenced by the Prussian military-industrial complex. The systematic structuring of subjects, the bell system to control time, the testing and grading, all these create a compliant workforce by psychologically conditioning children to accept authority, standardization, and conformity. While the Prussian education system had already been designed to create obedient soldiers and submissive citizens, it was John D. Rockefeller who played a crucial role in importing these methods into America. The Prussian system, which emphasized standardization, compliance, and obedience to authority, was seen as an ideal way to train workers for the industrial age. Rockefeller, a philanthropist who funded numerous educational institutions, believed that people should be educated to run machines, nothing more. He wanted workers who were smart enough to handle tasks but dumb enough to follow orders. Public schooling became the perfect mechanism for producing docile workers who wouldn't question the system. One of the key elements of the Prussian system that Rockefeller helped implement was the grading system, a method of categorizing students and determining their place in society. This system focused on obedience rather than creativity, fostering an environment where the most obedient students were seen as the most successful. What you probably don't know is that the infrastructure of the American education system was specifically designed to create a subservient workforce for the Industrial Revolution, ensuring that the powerful elite like Rockefeller could continue to extract wealth while maintaining control over society. He's famously quoted as saying, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." While Pavlov and Skinner are the poster children for behavioral conditioning, the depth of their work goes much further than causing dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell or training rats to press levers. B.F. Skinner, for example, was also involved in developing techniques for creating socially desirable behavior. He didn't just want to understand behavior, he wanted to engineer societies. One little known aspect of Skinner's work in his development of the operant conditioning chamber, or Skinner box, which wasn't just about experimenting with animals, it was designed as a blueprint for designing social environments that could shape people's behavior in ways that would promote conformity. Skinner's ideal society was one of total control, where every action was shaped by positive and negative reinforcements. This concept wasn't just theoretical. He advocated for a future society where all behavior could be shaped through mental stimuli, something that is already happening on a massive scale.
A playpen has been selected for our experimental environment because it is one to which the child is well acquainted. The unfamiliar additions include a food dispenser loaded with snacks and a plastic lever, which when pressed exposes a light, causes the dispenser motor to sound, and produces the snack reinforcer. Before the actual establishment of lever pressing behavior, it is best to separately establish the function of the light and sound as stimuli which reliably signal an upcoming reinforcement. The child has already been trained to stand near the dispenser as individual snacks were dropped into the food tray, so that a number of activities dealing with the free exploration of the dispenser and whatever else is strange to the child have probably been positively reinforced. This encouragement, coupled with the familiarity of the surroundings in which it was given, will most likely forestall the occurrence of interfering emotional outbursts. However, since the light-sound combination has never been associated with food, any debilitating effects due to this sequence should first be determined. And if need be, any onset of emotional behavior should be allowed to adapt by repeating these pairings a number of times. Throughout this phase of training, the lever has been removed, but the relationship between the light, sound, and reinforcing stimulus is not altered. Dismounting the response mechanism allows us to concentrate upon one behavioral sequence at a time. During this phase of training, the target behavior that is sought is approaching the dispenser shortly after the onset of the light-sound stimuli. No recurring group of activities immediately preceding the action of the light and sound is singled out for reinforcement in order to avoid the building in of an unwanted form of behavior, which later may be found to compete with the lever pressing and which would greatly slow down its rate of acquisition. It is wise to proceed with caution, since inadvertently reinforced behaviors created during this phase of training cannot always be easily and efficiently eliminated later on. Of the two stimuli signifying that reinforcement is on its way, it is the sound that is the most practical to utilize, inasmuch as it does not require the satisfaction of any special postural or orientational behaviors on the part of the child. Nevertheless, the light, although employed here primarily for purposes of visual illustration, can also be expected to gain control over performances which involve approaching the dispenser.
Fast forward to the 20th century. This is where the scientific exploitation of human psychology begins in earnest. Sigmund Freud, known as the father of psychoanalysis, began exploring the subconscious mind and its influence on human behavior. Freud understood that much of our behavior was driven by unconscious impulses, desires, and fears. But it was his nephew, Edward Bernays, who took this knowledge and used it as a weapon. Bernays, the father of public relations, famously said, "If you can influence the leaders, either with or without their conscious cooperation, you automatically influence the group they sway." Bernays used the principles of psychoanalysis to manipulate public opinion on a massive scale, creating consumer desires where none had existed. Through his campaigns, he transformed smoking into a feminist act, convinced people to buy things they didn't need, and, in the process, redefined reality for millions. Pavlov, with his conditioned responses, and B.F. Skinner, with his principles of operant conditioning, helped lay the groundwork for a scientific approach to shaping behavior. But this conditioning wasn't just about teaching dogs to salivate at a bell. It was about creating a society that acted according to programmed responses. Today, that same conditioning happens through advertising, media, and social pressure. You are a product, and your thoughts and actions are sold and bought like any other commodity. The 20th century witnessed the rise of totalitarian regimes that used propaganda and psychological tactics on an unprecedented scale. The development of mind control techniques during this period was aimed at both controlling thoughts and creating a permanent state of obedience among the populace. Nazi Germany, under Goebbels' Ministry of Propaganda, set the stage for mass psychological manipulation. They understood that controlling the narrative, fostering collective identity, and targeting emotional triggers, such as fear and hate, would manipulate public opinion. Media control through radio, film, and posters was used to reinforce the idea of a national enemy, directing anger and fear towards Jews and other minority groups, which ultimately facilitated the horrors of the Holocaust. This, of course, was nothing new. In the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin's regime perfected the art of using terror and fear to maintain control. The Soviet state used psychological manipulation and coercion, instilling fear in citizens about being accused of counter-revolutionary activities. The Great Purge from 1936 to 1938 was not only about executing perceived political enemies, but also about breaking the spirit of entire families and communities. The use of the psychushkas, or psychiatric hospitals, to imprison literal thought criminals was another form of mind control. Political dissidents who were seen as threats were diagnosed with mental illness and locked away in psychiatric facilities where they were subjected to torture, forced medication, and re-education. Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution aimed to eliminate dissent and promote the ideologies of communism. Using education, and mass indoctrination to solidify control. Red Guards were used to target intellectuals and anyone suspected of holding ideas contrary to the Communist Party. Like other totalitarian regimes, psychological tactics such as public humiliation, forced labor, and re-education were employed to force conformity. While we've talked a lot about psychological and military applications, a crucial piece of the puzzle is the role that corporations and the elite have played in shaping mass consciousness, shaping behavior, and engineering consent. This isn't just about advertising, it's about manipulating entire societies at a deep psychological level. Take Edward Bernays, for example, a key figure in the history of mass persuasion. He wasn't just shaping consumer habits, he was reprogramming society's understanding of individualism, freedom, and even desire itself. Bernays, who was Sigmund Freud's nephew, understood that emotions drive consumer behavior. Through his campaigns, he shaped the modern concept of the self, a self that needed to be fed, entertained, and constantly stimulated by products, status, and indulgence. The most sinister aspect of his work was the fact that he exploited the masses' subconscious desires and fear of missing out, thus creating a generation of consumer slaves who were not free, but in fact controlled by their very psychological vulnerabilities. Even in today's world, corporations use advanced neuromarketing to bypass our rational minds, appealing directly to the unconscious and emotional centers of our brains. These tactics are used to engineer demand and perpetuate cycles of consumerism, all while simultaneously conditioning us to remain compliant and obedient to the values they promote. In the 1950s, James Vickery, a market researcher, conducted an experiment that many people still find unbelievable. He claimed to have implanted subliminal messages in films and found that people would buy more popcorn or drink more soda without realizing it. The experiment was controversial, but it launched an entire industry of subliminal advertising. What you might not know, however, is that subliminal influence isn't just limited to images or sounds. It can be embedded in colors, smells, and even spatial arrangements. Modern designers and advertisers have learned to hack these senses in ways that make us act against our own best interests, often without us even realizing it.
The Asch experiment is one of psychology's oldest and most popular pieces of research. A volunteer is told that he's taking part in a visual perception test. What he doesn't know is that the other participants are actors, and he's the only person taking part in the real test, which is actually about group conformity.
Please begin. The experiment you will be taking part in today involves the perception of line length. Your task will be simply to look at the line here on the left and indicate which of the three lines on the right is equal to it in length. So, for example, if you...
The actors have been told to match the wrong lines. The volunteer will be monitored to see if he gives the correct answer or if he goes along with the opinion of the group and gives the wrong answer. In the first test, the correct answer is 2.
1. 1.
1. 2.
1.
Once again, the correct answer is 2.
3.
3.
3.
3.
3.
The Asch experiment has been repeated many times, and the results have been supported again and again. We will conform to the group. Again, we're very social creatures. We're very much aware of what the people around us think. We want to be liked. We don't want to be seen to rock the boat, so we will go along with the group. Even if we don't believe what people are saying, we'll still go along.
1.
1.
1.
1.
Group dynamics is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology.
1. 1.
In the 1950s, Solomon Asch conducted an experiment that showed how deeply embedded the need to conform is within us. In Asch's study, participants were shown a series of lines and asked to match them to a reference line. However, the rest of the group deliberately gave incorrect answers. Despite knowing the correct answer, many participants conformed to the wrong one, just because the group was doing so. Ash's experiment revealed the power of groupthink, the tendency to align with majority opinions, even when they are wrong. We are hardwired to avoid social rejection, even if it means rejecting our own sense of truth. This experiment serves as a reminder of how vulnerable we are to peer pressure, and it's not just in trivial matters. It's in the very fabric of our reality, where group dynamics and social pressures dictate everything from politics to consumer choices. The illusion of individuality is, in fact, the most deeply socially conditioned illusion of them all.
To answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her, except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
For a noon appointment.
Have a seat and they'll be out in just a couple minutes.
Great,
thanks so much.
Everybody was doing it, so I thought I was supposed to.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do?
But much of the deeper aspects of psychological warfare are still kept hidden. For instance, during the Cold War, the US government developed a series of black ops programs that involved using media and disinformation to manipulate public opinion in both domestic and foreign territories. One such operation, Operation Mockingbird, saw the CIA covertly infiltrate and manipulate major news outlets, turning them into tools of mass control.
It's a matter of real concern that planted stories intended to serve a national purpose abroad came home and were circulated here and believed here, because this would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country. Now, we're looking at that very carefully.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to two American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
What's more unsettling is that the methods of PsyOpz go far beyond just disinformation. We now see entire populations being psychologically primed through digital warfare, social media manipulation, algorithmic censorship, and targeted emotional manipulation using platforms like Facebook and Twitter. It's not just about controlling information, it's about controlling emotions on a mass scale. In 1961, Stanley Milgram conducted an experiment to measure the power of obedience. Participants were instructed to administer increasing levels of electrical shock to a person on the other side of a wall. The catch? The person on the other side was actually an actor, and the shocks weren't real. Despite hearing screams of pain, most participants obeyed the authority figure, continuing to administer shocks even when they knew it was causing harm.
Milgram had also looked at how we respond to authority. In order to understand how people were induced to obey unjust regimes and participate in atrocities such as the Holocaust, he set up an experiment. Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which, please? Teacher. Where?
Separated by a screen, the teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud. Horse. Rock. House. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer. Horse.
Experiment. That's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're going to get a shock. 180 volts.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of
You
here.
can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man today. I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please. All right, next one. Slow. Walk, dance, truck, music.
Two-thirds of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering a less voltage. Can't you check in and see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis.
This willingness to obey is deeply ingrained in us, and it's the cornerstone of mind control. The most terrifying aspect, it's not just about authority figures in white coats. In today's world, authority is everywhere. A well-known and most disturbing example of mind control is the MKUltra program, a series of CIA experiments designed to explore methods of mind control through drugs, hypnosis, and psychological torture. These experiments involved unwitting subjects, many of them civilians, who were subjected to LSD, hypnotism, and electroshock therapy, all in the name of creating mind-controlled spies. But MKUltra wasn't just about individual manipulation. It was about controlling minds on a mass scale. And here's the terrifying part. What if I told you that MKUltra, far from being an isolated event in history, is still going on today, but in more subtle and insidious forms? The methods developed through these programs were perfected, and now they permeate our society through media, advertising, and digital manipulation. At the core of trauma-based mind control is the understanding of how the human mind reacts to extreme stress and fear. When a person undergoes extreme trauma, especially physical and psychological abuse, the mind experiences a psychological fracture. This fracture allows the person to be split into different personalities, a process known as dissociation. In trauma-based mind control, the abuser manipulates this split to create a personality structure that is submissive, obedient, and detached from the pain of their actions. The trauma itself is used as a tool to create multiple personalities, where the person's original self is buried and a new, obedient alter ego is born. The infamous MKUltra project, run by the CIA in the 1950s and 1960s, was a direct attempt to harness trauma-based mind control. Though many of the details of MKUltra are still hidden in government files, we know that trauma was a primary tool in their experiments. Drugs like LSD, electroshock therapy, and other forms of psychological manipulation were used to push individuals into states of profound dissociation, allowing the mind to be programmed and reprogrammed. This project, which involved unwitting civilians and military personnel, was essentially an attempt to create the perfect spy. A person who could be mind-controlled into performing tasks without even realizing it. This included assassinations, espionage, and other covert operations. Military personnel were often used as test subjects, with psychological trauma as the basis for creating soldiers who could carry out tasks without moral hesitation.
Sponsored experiments did take place at hospitals, universities, and military bases around our nation. The goal was to understand the effects of radiation exposure on the human body. While most of the tests were ethical by any standards, some were unethical, not only by today's standards, but by the standards of the time in which they were conducted. They failed both the test of our national values and the test of humanity. Informed consent means your doctor tells you the risk of the treatment you are about to undergo. In too many cases, informed consent was withheld. Americans were kept in the dark about the effects of what was being done to them. The deception extended beyond the test subjects themselves to encompass their families and the American people as a whole. For these experiments were kept secret, and they were shrouded not for a compelling reason of national security, but for the simple fear of embarrassment, and that was wrong. So today, on behalf of another generation of American leaders and another generation of American citizens, the United States of America offers a sincere apology to those of our citizens who were subjected to these experiments, to their families, and to their communities. When the government does wrong, we have a moral responsibility to admit it. The duty we owe to one another to tell the truth and to protect our fellow citizens from excesses like these is one we can never walk away from. Our government failed in that duty, and it offers an apology to the survivors and their families, and to all the American people who must be able to rely upon the United States to keep its word, to tell the truth, and to do the right thing. Make no mistake, as the committee report says, there are circumstances where compensation is appropriate as a matter of ethics and principle. I am committed to seeing to it that the United States of America lives up to its responsibility. Our greatness is measured not only in how we so frequently do right, but also how we act when we know we've done the wrong thing, how we confront our mistakes, make our apologies, and take action. That's why this morning I signed an executive order instructing every arm and agency of our government that conducts, supports, or regulates research involving human beings to review immediately their procedures in light of the recommendations of this report.
The sleeper agent concept is the perfect manifestation of trauma-based mind control. In the intelligence community, a sleeper agent is someone who is programmed to carry out a task, such as assassination, espionage, or subversion, but has no conscious knowledge of their programming. They are activated through specific triggers, which could be a phrase, a symbol, or a specific event. These agents are typically subjected to intense trauma during their programming, which is then repressed until the agent is needed. The trigger activates the trauma and brings the individual back into a state where they can carry out orders without remembering who they were before the programming. The process of creating sleeper agents has been explored in the context of the Cold War, where both CIA and KGB experimented with mind control techniques to create agents who could infiltrate enemy states without raising suspicion. The Manchurian Candidate, the 1959 novel and later film adaptations, became an infamous fictional example of the sleeper agent phenomenon. In some cases, the trauma used to create these agents goes far beyond physical violence. It can involve creating deeply disorienting psychological states that make the agent forget their programming. Often, memory erasure is used, where the individual loses access to the memories of the trauma and programming, only to have them triggered at a later point in time. This is a form of neuro-linguistic programming. Aquino, who has been credited with coining the term PsyOpz, short for psychological operation, a figure at the heart of modern occultism, not only founded a satanic organization called the Temple of Set, but was also deeply involved in psychological operations within the U.S. Army. Aquino's work, especially in the realm of psychotronics and mind control, blurred the lines between military intelligence and occultism. Aquino wrote about psychotronic weapons, which are weapons that use electromagnetic radiation, frequencies, or psychoactive techniques to influence the human mind or body. These technologies are designed to induce certain effects on the target, ranging from altered mental states to direct control of behavior. In a paper titled Mind War, Aquino outlined how psychotronic technology could be employed for psychological warfare. His ideas suggest that mind control could be achieved through electromagnetic fields, which could influence an individual's mental state, potentially causing confusion, disorientation, or even inducing hallucinations. The disturbing aspect of psychotronics is its potential to be used in covert operations. These technologies would enable intelligence agencies and the military to manipulate civilians or even entire populations without their knowledge. Electromagnetic fields are known to affect brainwave patterns, and advanced psychotronic techniques may have been used in conjunction with trauma-based mind control. Aquino was born in 1946 and served in the U.S. Army for over 20 years. Primarily working in psychological operations, he was recruited into the Church of Satan by its founder, Anton LaVey, in the late 1960s. Aquino initially rose through the ranks of the Church of Satan and was a prominent member of the satanic community during its early years. However, his differences with LaVey on the philosophical direction of the organization led him to form his own group, the Temple of Set, in 1975. The Temple of Set is based on the worship of Set, an ancient Egyptian. Aquino's philosophy centers on self-deification, the belief that humans can achieve godlike status by transcending conventional moral and societal structures. The temple incorporates aspects of Satanism, Gnosticism, and Hermeticism, but it also places a strong emphasis on personal development and intellectual exploration. The organization considers itself to be a modern expression of the left-hand path, emphasizing individualism and self-realization over traditional religious morality. Aquino's background in PsyOpz is significant because his understanding of psychological warfare likely informed much of his occult philosophy. The Temple of Set, for example, emphasizes the use of ritualistic practices and symbolism to manipulate the mind and attain personal power. While many occultists focus on spiritual or magical aspects, Aquino's approach is more pragmatic and psychological. He is very much interested in using psychological principles to achieve individual empowerment. In fact, Aquino's deep involvement in military psychological operations and his role as an intelligence officer gave him direct experience with mind control techniques. His philosophical writings contain elements of social engineering and behavioral manipulation, which reflect his knowledge of modern psychology and military tactics. Aquino's career has been marked by allegations of satanic ritual abuse, or SRA, subject that gained public attention in the 1980s and 1990s during the Satanic Panic. In particular, there were claims that Aquino had been involved in ritual abuse and child abuse, particularly when he was stationed at the Presidio military base in San Francisco in the 1980s. However, despite multiple investigations, no criminal charges were ever filed against Aquino, and the accusations were largely dismissed as part of a broader conspiracy theory surrounding satanic cults. Aquino has always denied the accusations and stated that his work with the Temple of Set is not linked to any illegal or unethical practices. He claims that his focus is on spiritual enlightenment and personal empowerment, rather than engaging in any form of abuse or exploitation. The most profound connection between Aquino's work in PsyOpz and the Temple of Set lies in his understanding of psychological manipulation and the use of symbols. Aquino is a master of the psyche and recognizes the importance of ritual and symbolism in affecting human behavior. The Temple of Set's rituals are designed not just for spiritual growth, but also for psychological influence, both on the practitioner and on those that seek to manipulate. Aquino's work demonstrates how military intelligence, psychological warfare, and occult practices intersect. PsyOpz is the practical application of psychological principles to manipulate groups or individuals, while the Temple of Set focuses on manipulating oneself to gain power and self-determination. Both rely on understanding the human mind, emotions, and subconscious to achieve a desired outcome. In this sense, Aquino's work offers a unique intersection between military strategy and esoteric philosophy. Michael Aquino's creation of the Temple of Set and his background in military psychological operations provide a striking example of how psychology, power, and occult practices intertwine. The Temple of Set is not merely a religious movement. It is a reflection of the broader, darker undercurrents of mind control and psychological warfare that have shaped much of modern history. Aquino's philosophy is deeply rooted in his understandings of PsyOpz, where the mind is seen not as a passive entity, but as manipulated, controlled, and harnessed to achieve personal and social power. Not one believes in the occultism of the Temple of Set. It is clear that Aquino's approach to psychological manipulation and mind control serves as a reminder of the power that can be wielded by those who understand the inner workings of the human psyche. Whether they are military officers, cult leaders, or political figures, the history of PsyOpz Temple of Set demonstrates the enduring relevance of psychological warfare in shaping human behavior from ancient civilizations to the modern world. Aquino also wrote about psychotronic weapons, which are weapons that use electromagnetic radiation, frequencies, or psychoactive techniques to influence the human mind or body. These technologies are designed to induce certain effects on the target, ranging from altered mental states to direct control of behavior. In a paper titled Mind War, Aquino outlined how psychotronic technology could be employed for psychological warfare. His ideas suggest that mind control could be achieved through electromagnetic fields, which could influence an individual's mental state, potentially causing confusion, disorientation, or even inducing hallucinations. Aquino was stationed at the Presidio military base in San Francisco in the 80s when allegations of satanic ritual abuse emerged. He was implicated in a child abuse scandal at the base, although he was never charged with any crimes. The accusations were largely dismissed, but they persisted in alternative media and among SRA activists. The Presidio scandal involved allegations that children at a daycare center on the base were being sexually abused in connection with occult rituals. Investigations into these claims were controversial, and despite accusations, no substantial legal action was taken. The Presidio scandal is seen by some as a key example of the intersection of military intelligence, ritual abuse, and occult practices. Allegations against Aquino suggested that he used his position within the military to facilitate trauma-based mind control and satanic rituals, with accusations of his involvement in ritualistic abuse and psychological conditioning. At the heart of trauma-based mind control is the use of rituals to create dissociation in the subject's mind. Dissociation is a process in which an individual separates themselves mentally from traumatic experiences, essentially splitting their personality. In mind control programs, this is seen as a way of creating multiple personalities, or alters, that can be accessed and controlled by handlers. Some of the more gruesome accounts of MKUltra experimentation have alleged that the techniques employed included mind control methods such as satanic ritual abuse. Satanic ritual abuse refers to the practice of using rituals based on occult and satanic beliefs, including torture, mind control, and sexual abuse, typically in the context of coercion and psychological manipulation. In the 1980s and 1990s, the United States experienced a moral panic surrounding SRA, particularly when a number of SRA survivors began to come forward with accounts of abuse that seemed connected to powerful elites, occult groups, and even the military-industrial complex. This was before revelations came out about people like Jeffrey Epstein and celebrities like Diddy. This is also about MKUltra. While SRA is still a highly controversial topic, the allegations that have been made against high-level individuals in the military, CIA, and intelligence agencies point to a much deeper and darker connection to the ritualistic abuse. Some of these claims suggest that government figures, military officers, and intelligence agents have been implicated in the trafficking and abuse of children, often as part of secretive rituals designed to initiate individuals into powerful occult circles. These groups allegedly use trauma and ritual abuse as a method of mind control and coercion. The rise of satanic ritual abuse accusations in the 1980s and 1990s coincided with a wave of conspiracy theories alleging that powerful individuals in the military, intelligence, and government circles were connected to ritualistic abuse, child trafficking, and mind control programs. Allegations pointed to high-profile figures, including politicians, religious leaders, and military officers, who were accused of being involved in ritual abuse, sacrificial rituals, and psychological programming.
Taking hypnotism out of the realm of the occult and introduce it as a new science for the benefit of mankind.
To bringing what Adolf Hitler said was a way to mass mind control generations. It was Adolf Hitler who said that if there were any free thinkers left in society, he wasn't concerned because he had control of the minds of the children through the education system. That was something that I heard Bill Bennett quote himself in the application of the global education into the system. My experience in MKUltra, once it was on a White House Pentagon level, included working under Bill Bennett, which was how I was privy to that information as well. And I had seen it as a young child in Mackinac Island, Michigan, when it was first being implemented by George Romney. Michigan had soared to the top of the education system back in those days, and now, of course, we've had the global education just permeate through our schools. But fortunately, the people have become more aware and are waking up, and there's more and more homeschooling that's going on, which is very much a solution. But it's also important that people are re-educated to what history actually is, and people like Wendy, who are making those kind of efforts in their own areas of life, who are aware of it, are what is key to undoing this tangled mess of social engineering and mass mind control that has permeated our society and brought us to this point that we're looking at today.
Some of the most notable cases included the McMartin preschool case, which was one of the largest child abuse cases in U.S. history. The allegations involved a daycare center in California where children claimed to have been abused in ritualistic ceremonies. Although the case was eventually dismissed, many of the children involved spoke of satanic rituals.
Let's talk about the McMartin case. In April 1985, authorities went to the McMartin case and looked for tunnels under the school. The children had said that they were taken into tunnels under the school. There was a chamber down there. They were sexually molested. That involved ceremonies, adults with robes, candles, chanting. Adults had no clothes on under their robes. And they were taken up into a tunnel and a triplex, a bathroom trap door of the triplex next door. They were taken out in automobiles. We're talking about 2, 3, 4-year-old children, folks. And prostituted in the community. The authorities received this complaint in 1983. They began their investigation. The authorities finally in 1985, went out and decided to look for the tunnels because they said the children were hallucinating. The children also said that they were taken by air up into a mountainous area where they were exposed to satanic ceremonies based on what they described, and brought back in time for the parents to pick up the kids. So the authorities didn't find anything.
The Franklin scandal involved allegations of a child sex trafficking ring that involved powerful political figures, including U.S. senators and congressmen. Investigators found evidence of occult rituals and SRA connections. Military intelligence, PsyOpz, and occult practices is not confined to pedophilic outliers or bad apples like Michael Aquino. There is evidence to suggest that intelligence agencies have long understood the power of the occult and ritual as tools for manipulating and controlling both the individual and large populations. The CIA, for instance, has not only experimented with psychotropic drugs and hypnosis, but has also been deeply involved in the exploration of the occult as part of psychological operations. One example of this is Project Stargate, which involved the military's interest in psychic phenomena, remote viewing, and the study of the mind. This program, which continued for decades, was designed to explore the potential use of psychic powers for military and intelligence purposes. The U.S. government's interest in esoteric practices, remote viewing, and occult symbols suggests a deep connection between occultism and military mind control, in which the military seeks to exploit the power of the mind for covert operations. Crowley, one of the most notorious figures in the occult, has long been associated with military and intelligence agencies. Crowley's work in magic and mind control was foundational to many occult practices that would later intersect with government and military operations. His ideas on ritualistic mind control, psychological warfare, and the use of occult symbolism may have influenced not only military operations, but also intelligence agencies in their covert activities. Crowley had connections with key figures in the British intelligence services. During World War I, he worked with MI6, British intelligence, and is said to have contributed to their psychological warfare operations. It's been speculated that Crowley's interest in magical rituals and mind manipulation may have provided insight into psychological operations, which were central to both military and intelligence agendas during the war. His influence didn't stop in Britain. Crowley is often linked with American intelligence agencies through his connection to Jack Parsons, a key figure in rocket science and the occult. Jack Parsons, a pioneer of rocket science and co-founder of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, was a key figure in the occult movement in the United States. Parsons was deeply involved in the Thelema movement, which was founded by Aleister Crowley. His involvement in the cult led him to conduct a series of rituals aimed at summoning supernatural forces and manifesting his desires. Parsons' most infamous ritual, known as the Babylon Working, was an attempt to summon a female spirit of creation and bring about a new age of occult power. This ritual is believed to have influenced the development of rocket technology, as Parsons and his colleagues believed that scientific progress and occult practices were intertwined. What is less known is that Parsons' occult practices had military connections. The U.S. military was deeply interested in his rocket technology, and Parsons' work eventually led to the formation of NASA. His work in rocketry, combined with his occult interests, suggests a dual-use connection between military technology and occult practices, which raises questions about the role of mind control in military research and development. The Nazi regime in Germany also utilized mind control techniques that were rooted in occultism and psychological manipulation. Many of the key figures in the Third Reich were deeply influenced by occult beliefs, including the Erich Himmler, who founded a research institute that was dedicated to exploring the occult origins of race. The Nazis used a variety of psychological tactics, propaganda, and ritualistic symbolism to manipulate the masses and create a cult of personality around Hitler. The Nazis employed occult practices in their efforts to maintain control over the German population. This included rituals, symbolism, and the use of psychology to program individuals to be obedient followers. The SS were known for conducting rituals that involved sacrifices and esoteric beliefs. These practices laid the foundation for later mind control programs, including the experiments K and MK-Ultra. Project Paperclip, which brought Nazi scientists to the United States after World War II, included individuals who were directly involved in mind control experiments and occult practices. Police forces and military units often use rituals and psychological techniques to establish authority and control. The good cop, bad cop routine, for example, is a form of psychological manipulation used to create confusion and tension in a subject. The ritualized nature of this interaction plays on deeply ingrained psychological principles, exploiting the brain's ability to handle stress and pressure. The military uses similar techniques, incorporating ritualistic initiation and group bonding practices to turn civilians into soldiers. Basic training itself is often a form of psychological conditioning, employing dehumanization, fear, and social isolation to break down an individual's sense of identity and to rebuild it according to military needs. This is not unlike the rituals used in occult circles to break down the individual's psyche in order to create a more malleable and obedient subject. Torture has long been used as a psychological tactic to break the will of an individual, whether in military interrogations, intelligence operations, or even criminal investigations. The goal of torture is not just to extract information, but to completely break down the psyche of the victim, creating a vulnerable state in which the victim will comply with orders. Torture induces a hyper-stress response, leading to a breakdown of the individual's sense of self. In this state of extreme distress, the ability to resist control diminishes, and their subconscious mind becomes more open to suggestion. This is a key part of mind control in military and intelligence settings, as the victim's mind becomes so fractured that they will begin to comply with whatever they are told. Historically, totalitarian regimes have employed torture to break resistance and turn freedom fighters or political dissidents into obedient slaves. The use of psychological tactics such as food and water deprivation and mental manipulation has been widespread in regimes from Nazi Germany to Stalinist Russia, and continues to be used by modern intelligence agencies. The good cop, bad cop routine is a psychological manipulation technique widely used in police interrogations. The goal is to create a psychological imbalance in the suspect, making them feel both psychologically threatened by the bad cop and emotionally supported by the good cop. This combination creates an emotional pressure that can overwhelm the suspect's ability to think rationally, thus making them more likely to confess. The key to this technique is the psychological unpredictability of the interaction. The subject never knows whether the interrogator will be kind or cruel. This emotional roller coaster forces the individual into a position of mental fatigue, where they're more inclined to just give in. What most people don't know is that interrogators have a deep understanding of human behavior, particularly how stress affects the mind and how emotional manipulation can force a confession. This goes back to the classical conditioning techniques pioneered by Pavlov, but this method is also being applied on a mass scale. When it comes to military mind control, the focus is less on creating a personality and more on subduing the individual's will. Soldiers are subjected to intense mental and physical conditioning, designed to turn them into obedient instruments of violence. This training includes breaking down any personal inhibitions and emotional attachments to encourage soldiers to view killing as a logical task rather than a moral dilemma. The psychological toll on soldiers, particularly in combat, is immense. Military tactics such as dehumanization, viewing the enemy as subhuman, are employed to bypass moral restrictions. These techniques are designed to make soldiers feel disconnected from the act of killing, thus allowing them to kill with minimal psychological consequences. This manipulation can be so intense that many soldiers don't even remember the details of their actions once they return home. Moreover, soldiers are often exposed to extreme trauma, including torture, extreme combat situations, and grueling training, which acts as a form of psychological preparation for the battlefield. The use of PTSD and shock-based tactics in training essentially creates a submissive and emotionally detached individual who can be molded into a killer. Mind control tactics have been used extensively in military and intelligence operations. They have been deployed on soldiers, civilians, and even top-level decision-makers to maintain obedience, compliance, and control. The U.S. military and other state actors have long understood the value of psychological warfare and ensuring the compliance and effectiveness of their forces. Techniques such as sleep deprivation, sensory overload, and extreme isolation have been used to break the will of soldiers and civilians alike. The use of brainwashing techniques in the Korean War, where U.S. POWs were subjected to intense psychological manipulation by the Chinese, led to further understanding of how the mind can be manipulated under extreme conditions. It was discovered that induced confusion, repetition, and reinforcement can break even the strongest minds. Stanford prison experiment led by psychologist Philip Zimbardo in 1971 aimed to study the effects of perceived power by assigning college students to roles as either guards or prisoners in a simulated prison. Initially intended to last 2 weeks, The experiment was halted after just 6 days, revelation of extreme and unethical behavior exhibited by the participants. The guards became abusive, dehumanizing the prisoners, while the prisoners exhibited signs of severe emotional distress. The study revealed how quickly ordinary individuals could succumb to the power dynamics in such roles, and demonstrates how power can corrupt ordinary people. The experiment has significant implications for government, authority, and society, highlighting how unchecked power can lead to abuse and dehumanization. It underscores the dangers of obedience to authority, as individuals may act immorally when following commands from perceived superiors, and demonstrates how power can corrupt ordinary individuals. It also highlights the importance of accountability within systems of authority, such as governments or law enforcement, to prevent the exploitation of vulnerable groups. When you hear about dopamine, it's often framed as the pleasure chemical. But what most people don't realize is how deeply dopamine has been harnessed by the entertainment industry, social media platforms, and even political campaigns. Every like, share, tweet, and notification is engineered to keep you in a dopamine loop, a feedback system that's addictive by design. The system is akin to a digital version of Pavlovian training, where your brain is constantly primed to anticipate rewards. This isn't just about getting likes or playing video games. It's about creating a system that psychologically engineers a population that is perpetually distracted, seeking the next instant gratification and unable to think critically. The dopamine loop is the perfect neurochemical control mechanism that keeps people locked in a cycle of superficial desire and distraction, preventing them from realizing the larger systemic manipulation occurring in their lives. Mind control techniques are used at every level of society, from advertisements to entertainment, creating a pervasive system of subconscious manipulation. Television was a key medium for the brainwashing of entire generations. Through repetition, the mass media could implant ideas, ideologies, and emotions into millions of homes. But it wasn't just about what was being said. It was about how emotionally charged messages, repetitive programming, and targeted imagery could influence the subconscious mind. The CIA and other intelligence agencies have long known how to manipulate the media, ensuring that narratives can be controlled to shape public perception. From Operation Mockingbird to the modern-day mainstream media, the news has often been a tool for psychological control. Movies, music, and video games are often used to plant hidden beliefs and symbols into the subconscious of viewers and players. Hollywood, in particular, has been a powerful tool for social engineering, manipulating the collective unconscious of the masses. From subliminal messages in advertisements to covert programming in film and television, the entertainment industry plays a massive role in shaping public opinion. Video games now use sophisticated neurolinguistic programming techniques to influence player behavior, including reward systems, narrative control, and emotional engagement. What is seemingly entertainment is often designed to train the mind in specific ways, creating automatic responses to in-game events that can be translated to real-world reactions. The internet and social media platforms have ushered in an entirely new era of mind control, one that has surpassed traditional media manipulation. Where radio and TV once broadcast to passive audiences, the internet creates an interactive and personalized experience. Algorithms now determine what we see, what we buy, and what we believe by exploiting the weak points of the human psyche. The datification of our lives has led to the extraction of our psychological patterns, which are then used to predict and control our behavior with astounding precision. For example, Facebook, Google, and other tech giants collect data about our likes, dislikes, and habits, then use this information to tailor their content to maximize engagement. But it's not just about making money through ads, it's about shaping worldviews. And culture continues to reshape society's values, often without people even realizing it. Social media platforms reward addiction by continuously stimulating our dopamine systems, creating a cycle of need for validation through likes and shares, reinforced conformity, and subtly pushing us towards groupthink. We've become addicted to approval, and in the process, we lose touch with our true individuality. In today's world, mind control is becoming more complex and insidious. Social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok are not just spaces for connection. They are psychological landscapes designed to hijack the human psyche. You might already know that these platforms are using algorithms to keep you hooked, but what you may not fully grasp is just how deeply these algorithms are optimizing for emotional engagement, not intellectual engagement. The dopamine feedback loop is maximized with every like, comment, and share, which leads to addiction. But even more alarming is the fact that these platforms are designed to influence your worldview in profound ways, shaping how you see reality without you ever realizing it.
Manipulated by algorithms that are watching everything you do constantly and then sending you changes in your media feed, in your diet, that are calculated to adjust you slightly to the liking of some unseen advertiser. And so if you get off that, you can have a chance to experience a clearer view of yourself and your life. Society has been gradually darkened by this scheme in which everyone is under surveillance all the time, and everyone is under this mild version of behavior modification all the time.
You say it's bad for me as an individual. Is it bad for me because I'm addicted? Have I become chemically hooked?
You have. The founders of the great Silicon Valley spying empires like Facebook have publicly declared that they intentionally included addictive schemes in their designs. Now, we have to say, this is what I would call almost a stealthy addiction. It's a statistical addiction. What it says is, we will get the broad population to use the services a lot. We'll get them hooked through a scheme of rewards and punishment. And the rewards are when you're retweeted. The punishment is when you're treated badly by others online. And then within that, we'll very gradually start to leverage that to change them. So it's this very kind of stealthy manipulation of the population. When you use these new designs, social media, search, YouTube, when you see these things, you're being observed constantly, and algorithms are taking that information and changing what you see next. And they're searching and searching and searching, and they're just blind robots. There's no evil genius here until they find those patterns, those little tricks that get you and make you change your behavior.
I had these people who would come up to me and they would say, you know, I'm not on social media. And I would say, okay. The unintended consequences of a network when it grows to 1 billion or 2 billion people, and it literally changes your relationship with society, with each other, with it probably interferes with productivity in weird ways. God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains. You know, if the thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them to really understand it, that thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you, more likes and comments. I mean, it's a social validation feedback loop that it's like it's exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with, because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. And I think that the inventors, creators, and it's me, it's Mark, it's Kevin Systrom at Instagram, it's all of these people, understood this consciously, and we did it anyway.
I think we all knew in the back of our minds, even though we feigned this whole line of like, there probably aren't any really bad unintended consequences. I think in the back, deep recesses of our minds, we kind of knew something bad could happen. But I think the way we defined it was not like this. It literally is a point now where I think we have created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works. That is truly where we are. And I would encourage all of you, as the future leaders of the world, to really internalize how important this is. If you feed the beast, that beast will destroy you. If you push back on it, we have a chance to control it and rein it in. And it is a point in time where people need to hard break from some of these tools and the things that you rely on. The short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops that we have created are destroying how society works. No civil discourse, no cooperation, misinformation, mistruth. And it's not an American problem. This is not about Russian ads. This is a global problem. So we're in a really bad state of affairs right now, in my opinion. It is eroding the core foundations of how people behave by and between each other. And I don't have a good solution. You know, my solution is I just don't use these tools anymore. I haven't for years. It's created huge tension with my friends, huge tensions in my social circles. If you look at, like, you know, my Facebook feed, I've posted maybe 2 times in 7 years. 3 times, 5 times. It's less than 10. And it's weird. I guess I kind of just innately didn't want to get programmed. And so I just tuned it out. But I didn't confront it. And now to see what's happening, it really bums me out. Like, think about, like, there were these examples where there was a hoax in WhatsApp where in some, like, village in India, people were, like, afraid that their kids were going to get kidnapped, etc. And then there were these lynchings that happened as a result, where people were like vigilante running around. They think they found the person, and I mean, seriously? Like, that's what we're dealing with. You know, imagine, like, when you take that to the extreme, where, you know, bad actors can now manipulate large swaths of people to do anything you want. It's a really bad state of affairs. And we compound the problem, right? We curate our lives around this perceived sense of perfection because we get rewarded in these short-term signals, hearts, likes, thumbs up, and we conflate that with value and we conflate it with truth. And instead what it really is fake brittle popularity that's short-term and that leaves you even more, and admit it, vacant and empty before you did it. Because then it forces you into this vicious cycle where you're like, what's the next thing I need to do now? Because I need it back. Think about that compounded by 2 billion people. And then think about how people react then to the perceptions of others. It's really bad. It's really bad.
Future, the line between manipulation and control will blur even further. Imagine a world where every part of your consciousness is connected to a network, and every decision you make is influenced by external signals. This is the true promise of neurotechnology, and it's already being tested. Nikola Tesla envisioned a world where frequencies could be tuned to control various systems, including the human body and mind. In fact, some of his experiments, particularly with radio waves and wireless energy transmission, suggested that such frequencies could affect mental states, alter behavior, and even influence emotions. Tesla's work on resonance, the concept that every object or system has a specific frequency at which it naturally vibrates, has profound implications for how electromagnetic fields could potentially be used for mind control. Electromagnetic mind control is often seen as a fringe concept, but it is grounded in solid scientific principles. It involves the use of low-frequency electromagnetic fields to influence or manipulate neural activity in the brain. These fields can be generated through various methods, from radio waves to microwaves, and their effects on human behavior are subtle yet profound. The brain operates at certain frequencies, producing electrical patterns that can be measured through techniques like EEG, electroencephalogram. These brain waves are typically classified into different categories. Delta waves from 0.5 to 4 Hz are associated with deep sleep. Theta waves from 4 to 8 Hz are linked to relaxation, meditation, and creativity. Alpha waves from 8 to 12 Hz indicate a calm, alert state of mind. Beta waves from 13 to 30 Hz are associated with active thinking, focus, and problem solving. Gamma waves from 30 to 100 Hz are related to higher cognitive functioning and meditation. These brain waves are naturally occurring and reflect our mental states. However, by exposing the brain to external electromagnetic frequencies, we can influence or even entrain these brain waves, effectively changing mental states or altering cognitive processes. The potential for electromagnetic waves to be used for mind control was not lost on the military and intelligence agencies. The Soviet Union, during the Cold War, was one of the first to seriously explore the possibility of using electromagnetic weapons to manipulate human behavior. They developed psychotronic weapons designed to emit specific frequencies that could induce anxiety, paranoia, or even psychosis in individuals. And speculation exists to this day that it was used on U.S. citizens by way of frequencies that were coming into their homes through their lighting systems. The Russian woodpecker is a name that refers to a specific Soviet-era electromagnetic radio signal that was broadcast from the Soviet Union during the Cold War. This signal was a highly repetitive, pulsating noise that many described as resembling the sound of a woodpecker tapping on wood. However, what many do not know is that this signal was not just a harmless radio transmission. It was part of a larger, more ominous Soviet program, often speculated to have been an example of psychotronic weapons or a form of electromagnetic mind control. The Russian woodpecker signal, officially known as the Duga radar system, was a massive over-the-horizon radar system that operated at extremely high frequencies. It was believed to be primarily designed for military purposes, such as tracking missiles, submarines, and aircraft. The system was reportedly capable of detecting objects in the atmosphere from thousands of kilometers away. But the key issue that raised eyebrows in the West was not only its unusual technical characteristics, but also its potential psychological effects. The Duga radar emitted high-powered pulses at a frequency of 10 MHz. Often referred to as the woodpecker frequency. A signal that was broadcast across a wide swath of the radio spectrum, penetrating the atmosphere and potentially having profound effects on human health and behavior. At its core, the Duga radar system has been speculated by some to be part of the Soviet Union's psychotronic weaponry, weapons designed to manipulate or control human minds. The idea behind this is rooted in electromagnetic radiation and its ability to interfere with human brainwaves. The human brain operates at certain frequencies, brainwaves, which reflect different states of consciousness. The frequency emitted by the Russian woodpecker, 10 MHz, mimics the alpha brainwave state, which falls within the low-frequency spectrum, which is suspected to have the potential to interfere with or influence human brainwaves, especially if the signal is powerful enough. Signals at certain frequencies have been shown to affect human mood, emotions, and mental states, causing symptoms such as headaches, sleep disturbances, and anxiety. Many people who were exposed to the Russian woodpecker signal reported feelings of discomfort, headaches, nausea, and a sense of unease. This led to rumors that the Soviet Union may have been using the system to intentionally harass or manipulate populations in the West. Some theorists suggest that the repetitive high-frequency signals of the woodpecker could have had more profound effects, potentially disrupting brain functions, performance, and even influencing behavior over time. The intense radiation emitted could have also disrupted the human nervous system, leading to long-term psychological effects like fatigue, depression, and anxiety. The U.S. military in turn became interested in this technology through Project HARP, High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, which conducts experiments in ionospheric manipulation using high-frequency radio waves. There is speculation that the technology could be used not just for weather control or communication purposes, but for influencing human cognition or behavior. Moreover, research conducted by the U.S. Navy and DARPA suggests that fields can be used for non-lethal crowd control by inducing feelings of nausea, disorientation, or fear. These findings have been applied in the development of directed energy weapons. Tesla believed that the human body, like any other system, has specific frequencies at which it vibrates most effectively. This idea is the basis for the potential of resonant frequency manipulation, tuning external electromagnetic fields to synchronize with the brain's natural frequencies. This phenomenon is known as brainwave entrainment, where external electromagnetic waves influence the brain's electrical activity. For example, binaural beats, two different frequencies played in each ear, can entrain brain waves to a desired frequency. Similarly, electromagnetic waves at specific frequencies can potentially be used to induce states of calm, fear, or even compliance. In more extreme cases, researchers have theorized that electromagnetic manipulation can be used to induce altered states of consciousness, or even create memories in the minds of individuals, much like subliminal suggestion. These ideas are at the edge of science and technology, yet they echo the mind-control techniques that have been experimented with by intelligence agencies for decades. Although Tesla's research is often overshadowed by his more famous inventions, his work on radio frequencies and electromagnetic waves laid the groundwork for modern mind control technologies. Pioneering research on wireless energy transmission, using high-voltage electromagnetic fields to transmit energy through the air, suggested that similar techniques could be used to influence human minds. Tesla's patents, many of which were suppressed or never fully explored, hinted at his understanding of how electromagnetic fields could be used to influence human consciousness. His Wardenclyffe Tower, designed to transmit wireless energy, could have also been used for broadcasting signals capable of altering mental states. If Tesla had been allowed to continue his work, we might have seen a world in which electromagnetic mind control was understood long before it became a tool of the military-industrial complex. In modern times, the technology to manipulate electromagnetic fields has only advanced, with new possibilities emerging for their use in mind control and psychological warfare. One of the most talked about topics today is the deployment of 5G networks. 5G promises to bring faster internet speeds, but it also introduces new frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. Some scientists and conspiracy theorists alike have raised concerns about the potential of 5G radiation to influence human behavior and health. While the health risks of 5G are still under debate, the potential for electromagnetic radiation to affect the brain is not theoretical. It is well documented. There is growing concern that 5G frequencies operating in the millimeter wave spectrum could potentially have biological effects on the brain, including cognitive dissonance, anxiety, and even disorientation. The military-industrial complex is already exploring ways to use these frequencies for non-lethal crowd control and psychological operations. The 50s and 60s would see the birth of neurocontrol. Jose Delgado, a Spanish neuroscientist, made history when he implanted electrodes in the brains of animals and humans, demonstrating that he could control their movements. His most famous experiment was when he stopped a charging bull in its tracks by sending a signal to its brain using a brain chip. It was a monumental breakthrough, direct manipulation of the brain itself. What you might not know is that Delgado's work didn't just stop at controlling animal movements. The future of human society could be shaped through direct brain stimulation, a form of mind control that bypassed all traditional forms of psychological conditioning. His work raised questions about the possibility of brainwashing and mind control, questions that are still being explored in military and intelligence circles to this day. The potential for brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, to evolve from Delgado's initial experiments is terrifying. The research into brain implants, neurofeedback, and direct electrical stimulation of the brain is accelerating rapidly, with companies like Neuralink pushing the envelope. What was once a pioneering experiment is now being seen as the future, directly influencing human thoughts, emotions, and behavior via brain interfaces. Delgado is one of the more obscure but pivotal figures in the development of brain-computer interfaces and direct mind control. In the 1960s, Delgado successfully demonstrated that he could use electrodes implanted in the brain of a bull to control its behavior, and this work laid the foundation for direct neural manipulation, a technology that is believed to be used for both military and covert operations. Neural implants are not just the stuff of science fiction. DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, has been funding research into neural interfaces for decades. The goal? To create soldiers who can be remotely controlled, communicate telepathically, or even be shut down if they are disobedient. Perhaps the most fascinating and least discussed topic in the realm of mind control is the development of brain-computer interfaces. Imagine a future where we no longer need to be exposed to media or advertisements in traditional ways. Instead, they are directly injected into our minds. Early versions of these devices are already being tested by companies like Elon Musk's Neuralink, but their ultimate purpose could be much darker. BCIs have the potential to read and alter thoughts, directly manipulating your brain's patterns and emotions. This could evolve to the point where your mind could be controlled from the outside, a terrifying possibility if used by corporations, governments, or other power structures. Instead of having to filter out the noise and influence of media, you could be directly influenced at the thought level. This isn't science fiction, this is happening now, and the capabilities are growing. After all of this, you may wonder, what can we do? If our world is shaped by centuries of control and high-tech manipulation, how do we regain our freedom? The truth is, self-awareness is the first step in breaking the chains. The most profound form of rebellion in the modern world is to think independently and question everything. The powers that control us thrive on complacency. Once you realize that your mind is being manipulated at every level, through education, media, advertising, technology, and even chemical triggers, you can begin to free yourself. But first, you must see the prison that exists. And now, you've taken the first step in understanding its depths. From ancient occult practices to the development of psychological warfare and modern neurotechnology, the story of mind control is a complex, multifaceted journey. Each step has built upon the previous one, gradually shifting society towards a state where free will is a rare commodity. But what's important to understand is this: awareness is the first step to breaking the cycle. Understanding these ancient and modern techniques empowers us to resist them. The real battle is not only about breaking free from psychological manipulation, but about learning how to harness our own minds and control our own destinies. You're standing at the threshold of knowledge and power. What you choose to do with it will determine whether you remain a part of the manipulated masses or whether you step out and pierce the veil. At the highest levels of power, there exists an almost ritualistic set of practices that have deep roots in occult traditions, as well as psychological manipulation. Freemasonry, Skull and Bones, Rosicrucianism, and other secret societies have long been suspected of using rituals and psychological control to maintain their dominance over the world. These societies are not just fraternal orders, they represent occult knowledge passed down through generations of the world's elite families. At the core of these systems is a hidden doctrine that views the masses as little more than pawns to be manipulated, controlled, and moved to serve the purposes of the elite. These societies, which often include some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in the world, use symbolism, rituals, and subtle psychological tactics to control not just their own members, but society at large. The occult traditions are about control through esoteric knowledge, the exploitation of archetypes, and the manipulation of human consciousness through symbolic frameworks that affect the unconscious mind. The elite understand the psychological dynamics that keep the masses docile, compliant, and obedient to their will. By weaving these occult and psychological methods into the very fabric of society, they ensure their control remains unchallenged. What we've covered here are just the fragments of a much larger, much more complex web of psychological manipulation and covert control. Every piece is connected, and each new revelation uncovers a deeper layer of the hidden reality. These pieces, the ancient occult origins, the modern psychological tactics, the role of media and corporations, and the elite's use of trauma, come together to form a powerful system of control that has shaped not just individuals, but entire societies. The question is no longer who controls us, it's how they do it, and why we allow it. But in uncovering these truths, we begin to pierce the veil. It's only by seeing these systems for what they are that we can ever begin to reclaim our minds and free ourselves from the hidden chains of manipulation. Now armed with this deeper understanding, we must ask ourselves, what will we do with this knowledge?